It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
What will the coming year bring? And how many really want an honest answer to that question? I'll get to that after the following rundown on breaking frontline reports that televised corporate media doesn't mention. No surprise. First, the power structure continues to double down on denial and deception. Again, no surprise. From Politico.com, is it time to talk seriously about geoengineering? ? Really? This is a question as we're collectively circling the drain and the entire web of life going down with us. The Politico report continues. Manipulating the Earth's natural systems to counter global warming has long been viewed as a last-ditch option by many in the climate fight. But they say advocates for geoengineering have grown more outspoken in recent years about the need to at least research the controversial climate fix, which includes methods such as spraying aerosols directly into the atmosphere to reflect the sun's rays. Again, about that headline. Is it time to talk seriously about geoengineering? ? Really? After over 75 years of these operations growing and expanding, metastasizing around the world, Politico.com wants us to pretend that geoengineering, aka climate engineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, etc., weather warfare is just a proposal that we need to talk seriously about? No, it's a matter of historical record and an ongoing toxic atrocity in our skies, which only the clinically blind or morally bankrupt can't see. There are mountains of indisputable proof to back up the assertion just made. Film, photos, volumes of documents, including government documents, virtually hundreds of lab tests from around the world, but as the proverb goes, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. Denial will very soon be obliterated with a tidal wave of reality. You can quote me on that. Let's keep going. From research.gatech.edu, aka Georgia Tech University, solar geoengineering could save 400,000 lives a year. That's from a Georgia Tech study. For the record, that statement is a blatant, glaring lie of monumental proportion. Climate engineering is a Manhattan Project scale program of planetary omnicide, nothing less. The Georgia Tech report continues. Researchers found that cooling global temperatures by 1 degree Celsius with solar geoengineering would save 400,000 lives each year, outweighing deaths caused by solar geoengineering's direct health risks from air pollution and ozone depletion by a factor of 13, they say. This means that the number of lives saved due to solar geoengineering-caused cooling would be 13 times the number of lives potentially lost from solar geoengineering's known risks. That's Assistant Professor Anthony Harding, who contributed to these conclusions. First, when these so-called academicians feel they need to explain that a factor of 13 means 13 times something, that's a good indication of how they see us, as incapable of comprehending the most simple mathematical equations. Next, the claim of saving 400,000 lives, hard to know where to start with that morally bankrupt claim. Mathematically and statistically, the ongoing climate engineering everything, which includes saturating our skies with toxic light-scattering, sun-blocking nanoparticles, and bombarding the skies with countless frequency transmissions to manipulate the electrically conductive particles, all this combined is, again, mathematically and statistically the greatest and most immediate existential threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm. Climate engineering is destroying the ozone layer. Only 30% remains based on our metering at geoengineeringwatch.org, and when it's gone, we will follow, along with the rest of terrestrial life and most aquatic life. And about respiratory mortality, aka mortality from toxic particle inhalation, based on hundreds of precipitation lab tests taken around the world and hundreds more by the University of Minnesota, some of which were paid for by geoengineeringwatch.org, scientists determined that the quantity of toxic climate engineering nanoparticles, these are scientists from UC Minnesota, being dispersed annually into skies around the world, is in the range of 40 to 60 million tons. Try to comprehend that. 40 to 60 million tons of particles that can be so small 100,000 can fit across the width of a single human hair. That's a nanoparticle. The smaller the particle, the more harmful it is. The more bioavailable it is, the more bioaccumulative it is. This is true for nanoparticles of any element, let alone the toxic kind that constantly show up in our testing. Aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene, the list goes on and on. Try not to breathe. And then there is the total decimation of the planet's natural hydrological cycle. How well is that doing, with devastating drought, deluge scenarios now being the norm, along with weather and temperature whiplash? Chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding further fueling that equation. For a complete rundown on the climate engineering assault and extremely extensive testing geoengineeringwatch.org has conducted to prove these operations are ongoing, please take the time to view the groundbreaking geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming, available to view for free on our homepage. And if you think this issue doesn't concern you, you're wrong. All of our collective futures are so completely inseparable from what is happening in our skies, as is the entire web of life. New this week from the UK Guardian, yet another pitifully desperate and transparent attempt to marginalize anyone that dares to acknowledge the shockingly obvious and rationally inarguable climate engineering operations raging in our skies. Here's the headline. And yes, this is new. They won't stop. They can't. Chemtrail conspiracy theories. Why RFK Jr. is watching the skies. It's by UK Guardian author Oliver Millman, who is clearly playing his part for the predator-parasite class, aka the money printers, who completely control official narratives and have for so very long done exactly that, not just on climate engineering, but also conflict and carnage zones around the world. The truth is what they tell you it is, and don't dare question their lies, or you may reap the consequences. That's the fear the controllers want us all to feel. Back to the report. Chemtrail conspiracy theories, why RFK Jr. is watching the skies. Again, new from the UK Guardian, author Oliver Millman. Quote, belief in a supposed U.S. government plot linked to aircraft condensation trails has been boosted by confusion over proposals to geoengineer a response to the climate crisis. Let's stop there for a moment. Yeah, why would we not make that confusing connection, right? When everything the so-called climate science community says they want to do, put aircraft in the sky to spray light-scattering particles that will reduce solar output, make our skies filthy white, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, all of it happening right now, and film footage of these tankers at altitude turning dispersions on and off, and yet we're expected not to conclude that that's exactly what it appears to be. We're to conclude that no matter how much it appears to be something, it's actually not because they tell us it's not. The Guardian report continues with this. State legislation to ban what some lawmakers call chemtrails has been pushed forward in Tennessee and most recently in Florida. Stop there again. For the record, the legislation efforts only use the geoengineering term, which of course Oliver Milton from The Guardian doesn't want listeners to use or investigate for themselves, lest they find credible information confirming these operations. More from the Guardian report. Quote, believers of the chemtrails conspiracy theory contend that the white lines traced in the sky behind aircraft contain toxic chemicals that are released to achieve a devious end, such as mass sterilization or mind control. Oliver, you're changing the narrative. Millman is attempting to imply that such claims are somehow connected to Robert and perhaps the interview he conducted with me. This is patently false. The Guardian and Millman continue. Are chemtrails real? Quote, no, they say. The white plumes seen from the rear of aircraft are more aptly called condensation trails or contrails. That, Millman says, look like visible clouds. No, they are visible clouds. They're particulate clouds. They're not naturally nucleated clouds. And we now know, as I've reported in recent weeks, that the planet's natural cloud cover is diminishing, and that is an existential threat, and climate engineering is the core cause of that existential problem. Millman and The Guardian expect their readers to believe the official lies because they say so. Again, the following information is for the benefit of those that are just becoming familiar with the climate engineering issue. Numerous film footage captures posted at geoengineeringwatch.org prove conclusively, beyond any reasonable doubt, that what we are seeing in our skies are intentionally sprayed dispersions. The film captures reveal retrofit wing nozzles mounted on the wing pylons directly above the jet engines so that the dispersions can be labeled as, quote, condensation trails, which they are not. Film footage reveals these dispersions being turned on and off, going all the way back to World War II bombers. Close-up footage, all in the dimming. Proving this isn't a question of condensation. Geoengineering Watch testing with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Flying Lab, which will never be acquired again by anyone in the private sector, that came at great expense and effort from geoengineeringwatch.org. We also took a jet aircraft testing platform to higher altitudes, and these tests have long since conclusively confirmed primary climate engineering elements being dispersed from heavy aircraft at altitude, starting with aluminum nanoparticles, again, a primary climate engineering element named in climate engineering patents. And for the record, bioavailable aluminum nanoparticles are highly toxic to all life forms, no exceptions. And these particles are raining down through our breathable air columns, saturating soils and waters, as well as every breath we take. How long can you hold your breath? More from the Guardian report. Are any other weather modifications being conducted? Question mark. They say there is a confusing stew of different processes or just theories with different goals that have been variously called weather modification. Solar geoengineering or solar radiation management, these often get mixed up and mistaken for secret government conspiracies called cloud seeding. Wow, what a crazy idea, right? Because the criminal cabal masquerading as our government would never do anything in secret, would they? From The Guardian, for example, dispersing tiny particles into clouds to spur the formation of ice crystals that trigger rain or snow. They continue, Utah routinely does this to increase snowfall rates, and authorities there have had to point out that this is not connected to, quote, chemtrails. They don't use the geoengineering term there again. No mention of such terms by design. Geoengineering, climate engineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection. Yes, many U.S. states and countries around the world openly admit to their long list of climate disruption operations, but anyone who actually believes our government would do this on an inconceivably massive scale without asking for our permission first is, they want us to believe, a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. That's the programming the predator-parasite class is pushing on populations. These operations are raging in our skies, and if not fully exposed and halted very soon, we'll have nothing left to salvage of the planet's remaining life support systems that are in a cascading collapse scenario right now, along with our health. Confirmation of the smokescreen cover-up. NOAA, this is again from the Guardian report, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is setting up a system to monitor the stratosphere that could act as an early warning system for such activities. Went over this last week, and I think partially the week before. What a joke that whole narrative is. All that is needed is a pair of eyes that work and a still functioning sense of logic, and you can confirm these operations yourself. There's more from this report. David Fahey, director of the Chemical Sciences Laboratory at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, said the following, quote, in terms of large-scale airplanes taking material to the stratosphere, I'm not aware of anything, certainly in our country, end quote. Listen carefully. Semantics matter. David Fahey isn't aware of stratospheric geoengineering dispersions because the weather terrorists are dumping the vast majority of their sky filth in the troposphere. Just a play on words, David? Is that it? In regard to David Fahey's official denial, one of three possibilities: clinically blind, criminally negligent of the very field in which we're told he's a top expert, or he's lying. Take your pick. David Fahey continues, in reference to two recent major hurricanes, Helene and Milton, some figures, including Republicans, claimed were somehow steered by the federal government's meddling with the weather. Stop. Question. A lame attempt by David Fahey to politicize the dire threat of climate engineering, blaming just Republicans? For the record, those who actually pull the strings of power, those who control the money, are not of either orchestrated political stripe. More from The Guardian. They ask this: can solar geoengineering help solve the climate crisis? Question mark. They say this year is set to be the hottest ever recorded globally. That part's true. With climate engineering further fueling the overall fire, not mitigating it, the report continues. The failure of governments to stem this crisis has led to calls for more drastic interventions like solar geoengineering to curb the global temperature rise. Now, how's that going so far, by the way? After 75 years, the planet's in total meltdown, and they just keep doubling down on these programs because it's about power and control. It's not about mitigating the damage that this type of activity helped to fuel to begin with. Of course, that's not going to make it better. It's only going to make it worse. The Guardian then states, last year, the White House released a congressionally mandated report on how a research program into solar geoengineering would work. They say such plans are highly controversial, however, with some scientists and environmental groups warning that meddling with the Earth's thermostat might have unintended consequences such as altering monsoon seasons. Really? That's it? Just altering monsoon seasons? No, much, much worse. Again, completely derailing the entire global hydrological cycle, destroying the ozone layer, and contaminating virtually the entire planet with a plethora of toxic climate engineering element fallout. That's already happened. We now know there's not a single uncontaminated drop of rain on planet Earth, and I'm not denying the endless list of chemicals being made by the industrial military so-called civilization paradigm or other sources of damage to the planet. But when these elements are so ubiquitous globally, and when in the case of polymer nanoparticles, which are being found everywhere, including human brains, all our organs, causing a massive list of disease and consequence, when those particles appear to be engineered, there's a bigger problem that's not being acknowledged for obvious reasons. Final excerpts from the UK Guardian, damage control, disinformation propaganda. They say, there are also concerns about the lack of global governance around adding substances to our shared atmosphere, the potential for a huge temperature whiplash scenario. Stop. Yes, quote, huge temperature whiplash, their words. Exactly what has been and is occurring, getting worse all the time. And of course, the total biosphere contamination part. Again, some final, totally transparent denial from Oliver Millman and the UK Guardian. Now, scientists are faced with a resurgent focus on chemtrails amid a related debate over whether actual modification to Earth's atmosphere should be made in a desperate attempt to slow global heating. Final Guardian sentence. As the world continues to heat up, the conversation around solar geoengineering and related conspiracies is unlikely to abate. Stop. In summary, with the final excerpts in mind, an admission by the report that desperation is in fact a core part of the equation to, quote, slow global heating. But we're expected to believe that governments around the world, especially including our own, governments which are in fact nothing more than organized crime syndicates, would never ever deploy a climate engineering Manhattan Project without full disclosure to the populations that are suffering the consequences. And have been. Right. For the record, U.S. Senate documents specifically call for total blanket legal immunity for anyone and everyone involved with the climate engineering juggernaut of insanity. Check this example title from geoengineeringwatch.org. Massive U.S. Senate document on national and global weather modification. This goes back to 1978, outlining budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars then. This is an 800-page document. We've already highlighted the important parts, and in that document calls for total blanket legal immunity for anyone and everyone involved. And by the way, otherwise adversarial nations, China, Russia, US, were colluding and cooperating on these programs. We know that Soviet weather modification scientists toured US weather modification facilities at the height of the Cold War, and our scientists toured theirs. What's really going on behind the curtain? This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world, and the subject of climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass. I bring it up every week, and I'll continue to. That's the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach this critical mass by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Credibility is key. Geoengineering Watch will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They're available on our homepage. We pass on our printed super high quality materials at less than our cost of producing and shipping. Sometimes I and my family are up to the wee hours of the morning packaging these materials, which we mail for free to elected officials in countless locations, to media outlets, to firefighting agencies, so many more. We mail those out at our expense, completely at our expense. We mailed out something like 13 or 14,000 individual envelopes with our 20-page booklets to media all over the country. That's the tip of the iceberg. We're doing our best here, but we need as much help as we can get. This battle will take all of us, and we are rapidly running out of time. Please help us to sound the alarm. What else is certainly not going to, quote, abate? Government crackdowns on any who dare to dissent. New from theconversation.com. Repression of climate and environmental protest is intensifying across the world. No surprise. The draconian efforts of the controllers, again, the money printers, who not only have a stranglehold on mainstream media, but also nearly all so-called elected officials. There are some exceptions, and I'm grateful to them. I'm communicating with some of them. But elected officials that are in too many cases selected, not elected, especially at the top, to fuel maximum polarization and division in the population. Since the completely controlled corporate media's criminal attempts to suppress rapidly growing awareness on extremely dire existential threats like climate engineering are failing, the deep state then resorts to what it does best: force, putting a boot on the neck of anyone that dares to speak the truth to power. The Conversation.com report continues, climate and environmental protest is being criminalized and repressed around the world. The criminalization and repression spans the global north and south and includes more and less democratic countries. Democracy is an illusion. Please, time to wake up. The report continues, the intensifying criminalization and repression is taking four main forms. They say, 1, anti-protest laws are introduced. 2, protest is criminalized through prosecution and courts. 3, more harsh policing. And 4, in the most extreme cases, environmental activists are eliminated permanently. Central and South American countries have a long record of such crimes. With all this in mind, let's hope that those who claim to care about the environment, all the environmental agencies, organizations, and elected officials, let's hope they find the courage to address the single most destructive human activity of all, and that's saying a lot: climate engineering operations. Because there's no legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing that. Moving on from Vox.com. Climate change is pushing some governments to the breaking point. No mention of climate engineering, no surprise. But let's correct this pushing to the breaking point part. Dozens are already far past the breaking point. Many more will soon follow. And those countries with the most weapons are looting, plundering, pillaging, and polluting and outright destroying more defenseless countries to acquire land and remaining resources, and all under the guise of spreading freedom and democracy or self-defense. Welcome to Orwell's 1984 reality in real time. Back to the front lines. Climate engineering and meltdown from MSN. Southern U.S. to be hammered by scorching heat, drought, and wildfires. New study states summary. The so-called study reflects the coming scheduled weather, ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes, and atmospheric aerosol dispersions that diminish and disperse rain. And what does fall is completely contaminated. Let's add this from the Washington Post. Drought deepens in the Southwest, driven by little rain and extreme heat. The parched conditions are the most pronounced in Arizona, Nevada, and southeastern California. Las Vegas has not had measurable rain in 158 days. From Yahoo News, this: snowpack lagging below normal levels in Colorado River Basin. It's sublimating, even if there is snow there, because it's a chemically nucleated element. Much of that chemically frozen material sublimates, means it converts directly to a gas and bypasses the liquid phase. Dry ice is the extreme form of this, but this occurs to a large degree with chemically nucleated so-called snow that falls in so many forms now, from baseball and softball size hail to little snow pellets to styrofoam-looking things to giant cotton ball-looking things. None of this is natural. None of it. And if you live in a quiet area, as I do, you can hear these terrorists flying overhead in their jets, non-commercial routes, when there's a planned engineered winter weather event, that's all you can hear. It sounds like I live at the end of an LAX runway. Absolutely insane. For those that believe the Southwest water problem is over, think again. Devastating droughts are wreaking havoc around the world. The weather makers are just getting started. Again, for the record, I'm absolutely not denying the countless other forms of human damage to the planet. Geoengineeringwatch.org has always acknowledged this. But again, there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing climate engineering operations, which include chemical ice nucleation, cloud seeding, flash cooldowns. From IFL Science, atmospheric rivers are influencing unseasonably warm winters and heat waves. From that report, giant rivers in the sky seem to be associated with hot weather as well as rain and snow. Yes, labels are part of the programming, and all of it, all weather, has long since been tainted. Climate engineering is the most disruptive factor, but every single form of human activity that impacts the planet's processes and energy balance is a part of the problem. It's a this and that equation, not a this or that. Ionosphere heater facility weapons of mass destruction like HARP in Alaska, there's one in Norway, Antarctica, and many other locations, can and are manipulating atmospheric pressure zones, which can and are manipulating the jet stream movements and thus moisture flows. From Newsweek, atmospheric rivers set to dramatically change up and down West Coast. They say our changing climate is set to dramatically alter atmospheric rivers, powerful storms that carry vast amounts of water vapor and heavy rainfall that batter the West Coast of the United States. That's according to a new study from the U.S. National Science Foundation. They're all part of the narrative that is formed by the private defense contractors, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, who do all the weather modeling for the nation's so-called weathermen, that have, in the case of National Weather Service and NOAA, an illegal federal gag order on them. Think about that. They continue. As the planet warms, the storms will evolve differently in Southern California and the Pacific Northwest regions, hit regularly by atmospheric rivers, especially in winter. They say their growing intensity poses a significant threat to coastal communities. Now this, they say, using advanced climate simulations, the research team explored how future atmospheric rivers will interact with oceanic conditions such as surface temperatures and water mixing. That statement is 100% deception. Again, private defense contractors Raytheon and Lockheed Martin do all the weather modeling, National Weather Service and NOAA. The scripts of the scheduled weather need to match. That's the point. That's the purpose of this central control. Over the holidays, climate engineering cover-up corporations like the Weather Channel and Weather Nation do everything they can to sensationalize any and every single chemical ice nucleation engineered winter weather event. But what's the real story? Let's start with this from ABC News. Arctic Cat will suspend operations indefinitely, adding to a declining snowmobile industry. From the report, Minnesota, another snowmobile manufacturer, has suspended its operations. Arctic Cat announced it will cease its operations indefinitely at its plants in Thief River Falls and St. Cloud, Minnesota. Arctic Cat's competitor, Polaris, is also facing challenges. Imagine that. They continue. Another big name in the snowmobile industry, Yamaha, announced in 2023 that it would also be leaving the snowmobile industry after more than 50 years in the market. Let's keep going. From Splinter.com, the world is losing winter. From that report, the effects of this evaporated winter are far-reaching. The ski and snowboard industries, of course, are looking down the barrel here. Already terrified and trying to figure out how to survive a future with far less snow and far fewer days to enjoy it. Reduced snowpack on mountains will cut water supplies as well. They already are, and less time below freezing will probably worsen health risks related to mosquitoes, ticks, and other disease carriers. The GMO kind that they're releasing all over the world, is that part of this equation? They continue. The timing of agriculture will also suffer, with various crops relying on certain amounts of winter chill to survive. That is definitely a big problem, as we know in the California Central Valley, that various types of hormonal deciduous tree defoliants are being used to force orchards into dormancy so that they have enough downtime. What are those chemicals doing to us, and why are other deciduous trees everywhere in these regions and around the country? This is what we proved with testing from University of Minnesota, that these same synthetic hormonal defoliants are being used in fall rains to force deciduous trees into dormancy to create the appearance of a change of season when it's not cold enough for these trees to drop the leaves on their own. That's why you have fully foliated dead leaves in places where the wind hasn't yet blown them off. That's not nature. That's what's coming down in our rain doing that. They could defoliate entire jungles in the 60s. How far do you think they've come since then? And again, we're not talking about a dioxin, which was used in Vietnam. We're talking about something much more high-tech, but not necessarily any less harmful. Yet even now, how many self-proclaimed truth-tellers are still pushing the exact false narrative that the controllers and the climate engineers want? Global warming is a hoax, they say. They pretend the planet is actually cooling. They pretend there's a coming ice age. My question to them is this: on what planet? Because it isn't this one. Earth is in total meltdown mode, with climate engineering further fueling the fire. The cold, cold, cold narrative is unraveling. From AccuWeather, this: where will old man winter whip up travel woes for Christmas and beyond? Question mark. The report then says, although winter weather hazards will be few and far between, parts of the country will contend with slowed travel from rain, thunderstorms, and fog. Not even a mention of chemical snow in this one, or baseball-sized hail, another consequence of chemical ice nucleation. And about the weather in the U.S., and in many cases abroad, along the U.S. West Coast, heavily seeded, unorganized, drifting zonal flows of moisture from the Pacific are being blasted with ground-based frequency transmitters. We can see this on the water vapor loops along the U.S. West Coast as the moisture drifts inland. This process scatters the moisture over the widest possible region, often encompassing a half dozen western states, with featureless cloud canopy, often with very light freezing rain or drizzle or nothing at all. Welcome to chemical ice nucleation, cloud seeding, and solar radiation management. And this chemical cold feels like a chemical cold. It's an unnatural, penetrating feeling. Again, about the thermal energy buildup on Earth. Climate engineering is making it worse overall, not better. Short-term chemical cooldowns at the cost of an even worse overall warming. How fast is the planet warming right now, statistically? This fast. The thermal energy equivalent of 13 Hiroshima bomb detonations per second. When I started this broadcast, it was about 4 per second. Now it's at 13 because we're in a runaway event. Same subject, this from MSN.com. 2023 was extremely hot, then came 2024. That's the headline from the report. The record-setting buildup of heat has surprised scientists, setting off a climatic whodunit. Really? A quote, whodunit? Are the omnicidal climate engineering operations a joke to these people? It would seem. They continue. Some drivers are clear, they say. A primary cause is the continued burning of carbon fuels compounded by the natural El Nino climate patterns. Stop there for the record. The ENSO patterns like El Nino can't be considered natural at this point. No weather can. The report goes on, but those factors alone may not account for the full surge in persistent heat seen this year, scientists say. They're now exploring what other factors may have contributed. A lack of cloud cover, they say, that normally shields the planet from the sun's heat. Let's stop there. The gravity of that issue cannot be overstated. I've been covering the recent and long overdue acknowledgement of diminishing natural cloud cover. And this near-term, again, existential threat should be headlines around the world. But scripted political theater will be kept on center stage instead, or selected domestic dramas, all designed to distract populations from the oncoming train of total collapse, societal and ecological, till the last possible moment. No nuclear cataclysm is needed, though that will certainly also become a part of the equation. Conflict and power plant meltdowns. More headlines. 2024 hottest year from ScienceAlert.com. Even NASA can't explain the alarming surge in global heat we're seeing. From the report, the world has been getting hotter for decades, but a sudden and extraordinary surge in heat has sent the climate deeper into uncharted territory, and scientists are still trying to figure out why, they say. Yes, again and again and again, we hear the so-called scientists just can't figure out what's going on with the weather and the unfolding planetary meltdown. We knew at geoengineeringwatch.org and have desperately tried to sound the alarm for over a decade and a half. How is it we knew and they didn't? Still not a word about climate engineering, which it seems remains invisible to the so-called climate science community. Over the past 2 years, temperature records have been repeatedly shattered, they say, by a streak so persistent and puzzling, it has tested the best available scientific predictions about how the climate functions. Can you believe any of this? That they can't acknowledge this massive climate engineering elephant in the skies that turns our formerly blue skies into something that looks like a science fiction movie, and they just can't see it. They just can't figure it out. Gavin Schmidt, director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, said this, quote, "I wish I knew why, but I don't," end quote. I did cover part of this in a previous broadcast, but this should be pondered again. Globally recognized scientist from NASA, Gavin Schmidt, just doesn't have a clue about what's going on with the climate. More criminal cover-up. Gavin, here's a question. How do you think the public will respond once they awaken to what has been done to them and the planet on which they and their posterity completely depend? Will the justifiably outraged masses come looking for all those responsible, Gavin, to hold them legally and morally accountable, not just for carrying out the toxic climate engineering onslaught, but for also covering it up? Time will tell, Gavin. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 490, December 28th, 2024. I have never missed a week. 10 years now, and done many other interviews for years, even preceding all of this and during all of this. This is all I do, 7 days a week. I'll never stop unless or until the insanity in our skies is exposed and halted. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all those that are courageously marching forward in this fight. It's our collective efforts that can still make a difference. And in regard to a team effort, my deepest thanks to my wife, Jovita. Her relentless and unwavering help in this battle has been and is far beyond essential. She has worked tirelessly in this fight over so many years, for which I will be forever grateful. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities, now with over 25 million views on YouTube in spite of draconian censorship. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. How do we reach those that still aren't looking up? Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal is to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. We don't offer or endorse anything else except that which is essential to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials with shocking images, a picture's worth 1,000 words, as the proverb goes. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies and shirts. Photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on this most dire issue. Reaching a critical mass of awareness, only way forward in this fight. It is the great imperative. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. These images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And again, to all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting climate engineering, you have my deepest gratitude, now and forever. Moving on, I first want to make mention of this. The tree frogs croaking away well into winter, almost January in Northern California. The tree frogs are still out. They don't know what to do. And this breaks my heart. The frogs that are left, there were once so many frogs here in the fall and other times of the year that all you could hear was this echoing through the canyons, and now there's so very few, and I try to save them wherever I can find them if they wander too far from the ponds. I try to bring them back but it breaks my heart to hear their hoarse voices croaking with chemically nucleated rain falling everywhere in the middle of winter. Nobody seems to care. Species collapsing around the globe, the species extinction rate right now, is about 15,000 times the background rate. That's 1.5 million of normal. How long does anyone think that can continue? It can't. Moving on from technoscience.net, this devastating synthetic gas is spreading 3,500 times more impactful than CO2 from that report. Hydrofluorocarbons, of which HFC 125 is a part, were initially designed to replace CFCs, which are responsible for ozone layer depletion. No mention of climate engineering. Their effect on global warming is alarming. That's the new replacement gas with a global warming potential 3,500 times greater than CO2 over 100 years. HFC 125 is a significant heat trap, you think? Wow, what a brilliant technofix idea that was. Fix the CFC problem with something that heats 3,500 times worse. Great idea. And still not a word about climate engineering, which far exceeds the destruction of all the above. Quick footnote on another blow to homeowners from the wild weather. Just want to make mention of this from the Wall Street Journal. Insurance and taxes now cost more than mortgages for many homeowners. Ballooning expenses rewrite the math on homeownership. But not to worry. If we remain on the current course, the insurance cost and cancellation bit won't matter. Not at all. Nothing will. From MSN, scientists warn of, quote, time bomb in Mediterranean that could spark terrifying storms. We have a long way to go, quote unquote, from the headline. The report continues, scientists say the devastating weather event is a sign of climate instability because of rising global temperatures. Experts say dirty energy sources like gas, oil, and coal are especially to blame for both catastrophic rainfall and droughts in the region, calling them two sides of the same climate change coin. No mention of climate engineering, aka weather warfare. Not a word. But here's a word from the disaster capitalist, from theeconomist.com. Global warming is speeding up. Another reason to think about geoengineering. Yes, indeed we are. And good luck to those profiting from geoengineering, the geoengineering nightmare, because your days are numbered on the current course, along with the rest of us. From elpias.com, English, artificial rain or anti-hail cannons. Can the weather be manipulated? Question mark. This is just more climate engineering denial, and it shows a coordination globally desperate to suppress the increasing public awakening on what's happening in our skies. This article states there is no out-of-control engineering causing damage or drought. Really. So governments could do this in the 60s so effectively, Project Papa in Vietnam, that in the 70s they passed environmental modification treaties forbidding this. Not that anybody cares about those treaties. No governments care. But the denial today is patently absurd. They continue. The white trails left by airplanes have nothing to do with experiments because they say so. And they continue to say that beyond conspiracy theories, the human desire to try to control the weather is not a hoax. There are already scientific studies that show that rainfall can be increased artificially through cloud seeding. Do we need a study? We have historical proof, again, from the 60s. There's something seriously wrong with the so-called climate science community. They are so programmed they can't see their nose in front of their face or don't have the courage to admit to it. The Orwellian reality that we all find ourselves drowning in does not bode well for the future, or lack of it, of the human race. Stop and consider. Is it even remotely rational to believe that those who truly control the military-industrial complex, i.e. the money printers, actually care about the health and welfare of the masses? Really? When the very same global predator-parasite class has long since made clear its objective of radically reducing global populations as fast as they can? On that note, the powers that shouldn't be have been practicing for a very long time. Project 112, this is directly from Wikipedia, there's many other sources. Project 112 was a biological and chemical weapon experimentation project conducted by the United States Department of Defense from 1962 to 1973. The project started under John F. Kennedy's administration, not that he necessarily knew about it or what it was, and was authorized by his Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, the one who brought us into a war on false premises at False Flag. that Gulf of Tonkin incident, as part of a total review of the U.S. military. The name Project 112 refers to this project's number in the 150 project review process authorized by McNamara. Funding and staff were contributed by every branch of the U.S. Armed Services and intelligence agencies. They're all a part of it. Think about that. Canada and the United Kingdom also participated in some of Project 112 activities. What were those activities? Project 112 primarily concerned the use of aerosols, sound familiar? To disseminate biological and chemical agents that could produce controlled temporary incapacitation, or certainly far worse. As I've been over many, many times in this broadcast, we now know from extensive testing that polymer fibers and graphene are in our precipitation, and both those elements are used militarily as a biological carrier platform to carry a pathogen from the clouds to the ground. What's that doing in our rain? This report continues. The test program would be conducted on a large scale at extracontinental test sites in the Central and South Pacific and Alaska in conjunction with Britain, Canada, and Australia. They're all involved. It's one giant, massive criminal cabal. They say at least 50 trials were conducted. Of these, at least 18 tests involved simulants of biological agents, and at least 14 involved chemical agents, including sarin and VX gas. Public availability of information on Project 112 remains incomplete. Imagine that. And we now know, again, as I've cited before in this broadcast in the Washington Post, there were no less than 239 open-air biological experiments carried out on innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians by 1977. How many have occurred since? Connect. Culling and climate collapse. They are inseparable. From counterpunch.org, Hell and High Water, the Year in Climate Chaos. Here's a quote from James Hansen. He may be the most recognized climate scientist in the world. He says, when our children and grandchildren look back at the history of human-made climate change, this year and next will be seen as the turning point at which the futility of governments in dealing with climate change was finally exposed. James, how about telling the whole truth that climate engineering is core to all of this? It has pounded the nails into our collective coffins since immediately after World War II, making an already bad situation far worse, not better, and never intended to make it better. Climate engineering has only ever been about power and control, nothing else. Nothing benevolent about it, never was. From theconversation.com, climate change is making plants less nutritious. That could already be hurting animals and grazers. Could already be? There are many things that don't even grow in Northern California because the soils are basically sterilized from the toxic rain and the intense UV. Done. Nothing decomposes on the forest floor. Everything just sits there. Trees are completely dormant. They don't grow almost at all. There's a few exceptions, but not many. And for those that think this isn't happening, you haven't been to a forest in many regions around the world lately. No forest smell because the stomata, the respiratory ports on trees, this is the same with crops, they're shut. They're shutting. They don't intake carbon. They don't release oxygen. The planet's respiratory process is completely breaking down, and the single biggest factor for many reasons is climate intervention operations, the frequency transmissions that are associated with them, the ozone-destroying factors, toxic rain, all of it. And the climate science community can't find enough courage to do their part, to stop it. More alarming headlines. Let's keep going. From BBC, climate change, staggering rate of global tree losses from fires. Fires most directly related to climate engineering. Please search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. You won't like what you learn. We're not talking about the source of ignition. That's a separate subject. What is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? That's climate engineering. Let's keep going. Here's an alarming headline, and if you see the film that goes with this, that's even more alarming. I watched it several times. From Smithsonian Magazine, squirrels are displaying widespread carnivorous behavior for the first time in a California park, new study finds. The familiar rodents known for eating nuts and seeds have been spotted hunting and decapitating voles in a gruesome dietary adaptation. Scientists say it might be a signal resiliency in the face of future environmental pressures. It's not future, it's here, or they wouldn't be behaving this way, right? The film is this squirrel running down a vole like a bobcat would and completely thrashing it apart and chewing it to bits. That's not a normal squirrel behavior. The world's going mad. It's falling apart. Animals aren't making it, and they're doing whatever they can to survive day by day, and we're going about our lives pretending some political circus of insanity is going to make everything great again. And no, criticism of one administration is not an endorsement of another. It's all theater, all designed to polarize populations so they don't see the oncoming train, and that's exactly what it's working for. New from the UK Guardian, increasingly worried more than 250,000 waterbirds disappear from eastern Australia. Let's put this into context. It was about half in 1 year from 2023 to now. Half their waterbirds are gone. How long do we think that trend can continue? And there's this recent report from animalsurvival.org. Collapsing wildlife populations near points of no return, report warns. No, for an incalculable amount of species, they're already gone, already extinct. And so many are functionally extinct. And yet, again, everyone pretending technology is going to save us. How's that going so far? Global wildlife populations have plunged an average of 73% in 50 years. It's actually about 80%. Scientific assessment has found as humans continue to push ecosystems to the brink of collapse, not to the brink, over the edge, free fall. From weatherzone.com, extreme heat wave hits Western Australia. Extreme heat wave and fire conditions. Again, Australia is going to bake and burn this year. It's their summer there now. Another from the weatherzone.com, relentless rainfall soaking northeast Queensland. Been there. A forest called the Dane tree. Was beautiful when I was there. No more. From the age.au.com, smoke clears over Melbourne as regional fires threaten homes. It's an ongoing story there. From DWTV, bushfires burn out of control, talking about Australia again. We don't see any of this on U.S. mainstream media because we're too busy watching political theater. From via Campesina.org, Haiti, devastating floods leave tragic toll on lives and livelihoods. From AccuWeather, dozens of luxury condos and hotels in Florida are sinking. Study finds, don't move to Miami Beach. They're already spending about $1 billion a year trying to pump their streets out. That city is going down soon. Going to need to snorkel there. From ABC News, Senate report, climate change, main reason for home insurance policy drops. Already went over that. Electric cars, what a great idea those are. Not. It does nothing for the environment. And I don't care who's offended. It doesn't do a damn thing. And I am an environmentalist to the core, and this is not an endorsement of carbon fuel. Also horribly bad, also pounding nails into our collective coffins. Please watch the film Planet of the Humans and learn how non-renewable, so-called renewable energy is. And no, again, not endorsing carbon fuel. Also part of what brought us to this very, very dark hour. And for the statements I just made, I'll hear from some who will say, I'm not allowed to tell the unpleasant truth unless I have a magic solution that will make it all better. Here's my answer. My magic solution: stop decimating the planet and its last remaining life support systems, or the story ends badly. Simple. From Helix.com, global political instability overtakes extreme weather as biggest risk concern. The report says political instability has overtaken extreme weather as the biggest risk concern for businesses, according to a new survey from global security and healthcare risk management business Helix. Shifting alliances and growing divisions within the geopolitical landscape have contributed to 96% of those responding to the survey revealing their belief that the world is a more dangerous place. That's a gross understatement. Correction on this Helix.com headline: extreme weather, aka unfolding and accelerating climate and ecological collapse, is the core causal factor behind global geopolitical instability. The issues are inseparable. How obvious can that be? Climate engineering fueling all of it. From AccuWeather, their idea of a magic solution: just think happy thoughts. From the AccuWeather report, quote, negative language can perpetuate feelings of doom. Don't be a doomer. So helpful. From Medium.com, this is my answer. Why hope is killing the planet. The belief that someone, somewhere, will solve the problem. And that is the problem. Many that still sit idly on the sidelines claim to be fearful that future generations will face unimaginable challenges. For the record, no need to worry about that. Short of a mass awakening that's motivated enough to initiate a complete course correction by our species, there won't be any future generations. And about the underground bunkers being built by the predator-parasite class, these installations will be their tombs. On the current course, no one gets out alive. Is such an ending now inevitable? Has the human race, taken as a whole, sown the seeds of its own near-term extinction? At face value, mathematically and statistically speaking, the answer is yes. But what can't we know? The miracle of life, of this beyond comprehension, miraculous planet, all beyond our ability to even begin to understand. Did it all just happen by itself? Just an extreme accident of circumstances? The statistical odds for such a conclusion is zero. So what will 2025 bring for us all? This is certain. There will be challenges far beyond what most yet dare to imagine. But no matter how dark the horizon, and it is indeed dark, rationally, logically, I do not believe we are alone in this battle. And are we not here for a purpose, for a journey of growth that goes far beyond any personal pursuit of pleasure? If we collectively summon our courage and an unyielding sense of mission, who can say what we might yet accomplish even at this late hour? Who can say what allies we may yet have in this fight, starting with the creator of it all, the miracle of life, perhaps waiting and watching? What will we choose to do with the time we've been given? It's now or never. Tomorrow is too late. If we can fully expose the climate engineering assault, we can stop it. If we can do that, we could buy time to deal with other existential threats. That's worth fighting for. We owe this to the Creator and to future generations that will never be if we don't join together and completely alter our current course. Check the activist suggestions link for specific instructions on how you can help move this fight forward. Please, as we enter 2025, make your voice heard, make every day count while it can still make a difference. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from Geoengineeringwatch.org.